After my father's passing, when we opened his secret box, we found a picture where I and his so-called enemy are seen smiling. Then I folded the letter, placed it back in the box, and sat on the floor of his empty room for a very long time. My father was not a complicated man. Or at least, that's what I told myself for 31 years. He woke up at 5:47 every morning. Not 5:45, not 5:50, exactly 5:47, because that's when the light hit the kitchen window at an angle that made his coffee look, quote, the color of good things. I know that because he told me once when I was 9, and I never forgot it. That was my dad. Small details, big feelings, zero explanation. We had a routine. Sundays he made scrambled eggs with too much butter. I'd come over around 11. We'd watch whatever game was on even if neither of us cared about the sport, and he'd fall asleep in the recliner by the third quarter. I'd cover him with the green blanket that had a small burn hole from a barbecue incident in 2009 and let myself out. It was quiet. It was ours. I didn't appreciate it nearly enough. The red flags about Marcus, my dad's business partner of 22 years, were there. They were always there. I just wasn't looking. Small things first. Like how Marcus would say your father's getting older, at family dinners in this soft, concerned voice that I now understand was not concern. Or how he'd call me separately, never when dad was around, just to check in. At the time I thought, wow, Marcus really cares about our family. What a guy? Past me was such an idiot. My dad and Marcus had built Qley and Reed Construction from literally nothing. My dad put in $12,000 of his savings in 1989. I know this because I found the original agreement later, which, more on that soon, and Marcus put in the same. 30 years. 30 years of handshake trust and Sunday egg breakfasts, sometimes with Marcus joining. 30 years of my dad never once saying a bad word about his partner. Except, there was one name my dad never said without going very, very quiet. Daniel Osei, dad's enemy. Marcus called him whenever Daniel came up. You know how your father feels about Daniel. That man almost destroyed everything we built. He'd shake his head with this practiced sadness, this grief by association performance. And I'd nod, because what did I know? I wasn't there in 1997 when whatever happened. I just knew that Daniel Osei's name made my dad go somewhere else behind the eyes, and Marcus told me it was bitterness, and I believed him. I believed him for a long time. Here's the thing about Marcus. He was never outright cruel to me. He was cruel in the way that expensive hotels are cold, polished, professional, and somehow you leave feeling worse than when you arrived without being able to explain exactly why. The humiliation happened at my dad's retirement dinner. April 12th. I'm going to remember that date until I die. After my father's passing, when we opened his secret box, we found a picture where I and his so-called enemy are seen smiling. Then I folded the letter, placed it back in the box, and sat on the floor of his empty room for a very long time. My father was not a complicated man. Or at least, that's what I told myself for 31 years. He woke up at 5:47 every morning. Not 5:45, not 5:50, exactly 5:47, because that's when the light hit the kitchen window at an angle that made his coffee look, quote, the color of good things. I know that because he told me once when I was 9, and I never forgot it. That was my dad. Small details, big feelings, zero explanation. We had a routine. Sundays he made scrambled eggs with too much butter. I'd come over around 11. We'd watch whatever game was on even if neither of us cared about the sport, and he'd fall asleep in the recliner by the third quarter. I'd cover him with the green blanket that had a small burn hole from a barbecue incident in 2009 and let myself out. It was quiet. It was ours. I didn't appreciate it nearly enough. The red flags about Marcus, my dad's business partner of 22 years, were there. They were always there. I just wasn't looking. Small things first. Like how Marcus would say your father's getting older, at family dinners in this soft, concerned voice that I now understand was not concern. Or how he'd call me separately, never when dad was around, just to check in. At the time I thought, wow, Marcus really cares about our family. What a guy? Past me was such an idiot. My dad and Marcus had built Qley and Reed Construction from literally nothing. My dad put in $12,000 of his savings in 1989. I know this because I found the original agreement later, which, more on that soon, and Marcus put in the same. 30 years. 30 years of handshake trust and Sunday egg breakfasts, sometimes with Marcus joining. 30 years of my dad never once saying a bad word about his partner. Except, there was one name my dad never said without going very, very quiet. Daniel Osei, Dad's enemy. Marcus called him whenever Daniel came up. You know how your father feels about Daniel. That man almost destroyed everything we built. He'd shake his head with this practiced sadness, this grief by association performance. And I'd nod, because what did I know? I wasn't there in 1997 when whatever happened happened. I just knew that Daniel Osei's name made my dad go somewhere else behind the eyes, and Marcus told me it was bitterness, and I believed him. I believed him for a long time. Here's the thing about Marcus. He was never outright cruel to me. He was cruel in the way that expensive hotels are cold, polished, professional, and somehow you leave feeling worse than when you arrived without being able to explain exactly why. The humiliation happened at my dad's retirement dinner. April 12th. I'm going to remember that date until I die. Dad had decided, finally, at 73, to step back from the company. Marcus threw him a dinner at the Harrington. Nice place, white tablecloths, the whole thing. 80 people. Colleagues, family friends, people who'd worked with them since the beginning. I wore my navy blue dress. The one Marcus had once said made me look a bit corporate, don't you think? Like you're going to a job interview. I wore it anyway. Tiny act of defiance I didn't even recognize as one yet. Marcus gave a speech. It started fine. Warm, even. Anecdotes about the early days. A few laughs. And then, I kid you not, he pivoted. Smoothly, like he'd practiced it, which he had. Of course, Marcus said, swirling his wine. We wouldn't be here without the difficult decisions. The times we had to make choices about who deserved to be part of this company's story. Pause. Some people, he continued, looking directly at me, never really understood what your father built, what it cost him, what he had to protect it from. And then he said it. The first time, the one with all the power loaded into it like a gun. Loyalty isn't inherited, sweetheart. It's earned. 80 people heard that. 80 people watched him smile at me while he said it. My dad was sitting right there, and I watched his face do something complicated, a flash of something, before he looked down at his plate. I didn't say anything. I smiled. I excused myself to the bathroom and stood at the sink for 4 minutes with the cold water running and told myself he probably didn't mean it like that. He probably didn't mean it like that. He probably didn't mean it like that. He meant it exactly like that. I went back out, finished the dinner, drove my dad home. He was quiet the whole ride. I asked him if he was okay. He said, I'm fine, sweetheart, same word Marcus used. I didn't notice that then either. 3 months later, my dad had a stroke. And 6 weeks after that, he was gone. The week after the funeral is mostly a blur of casseroles and handshakes and people saying he was such a good man, which is true, but also doesn't help you figure out how to load a dishwasher when you can't stop crying long enough to see the buttons. Marcus was at the funeral. Front row. Very visible grief. Designer suit. I clocked the suit and then immediately felt terrible for clocking the suit. He pulled me aside after. We need to talk about the estate, he said. The business. Your father and I had some arrangements. I want to make sure you're taken care of. He said taken care of the way people say it when they absolutely do not mean it. I said I'd be in touch. I went home. I cried in my car in my own driveway for 20 minutes because I didn't want to cry inside where it would feel too permanent. And then I went to clean out my father's study. The box was in the back of the closet, behind 2 pairs of old boots and a broken humidifier. Wooden. Small. Locked with one of those little luggage locks. I almost didn't open it. I almost put it in the donate pile. But something made me find the key. It was taped to the underside of his desk drawer. Of course it was, and open it. Papers. Letters. A folded newspaper clipping from 1997. And a photograph. Me. Maybe 6 years old, gap-toothed and grinning. And next to me, his arm around my shoulder, laughing at something off camera. A man I didn't recognize. But the name was written on the back in my father's handwriting. Daniel Osei. My daughter. 1998. I sat on the closet floor and stared at that photograph for a long time. I nearly choked. His enemy. His enemy was laughing with me in a photograph my father kept locked in a secret box. Okay. I started reading the letters. Here's what Marcus never mentioned. Daniel Osei was not my father's enemy. Daniel was my father's accountant in the early days, and later, his friend. One of his closest friends. In 1997, Daniel found something in the company books, a discrepancy. A $340,000 discrepancy, actually. I'm rounding down. That pointed directly at Marcus. Daniel brought it to my father. My father, trusting, stubborn, loyal to a fault, didn't believe him. They fought. Daniel left. My dad, who had built 30 years with Marcus, chose Marcus. And Marcus spent the next 25 years making sure my dad never stopped believing. Daniel was the villain. I read this in my father's own handwriting. A letter he'd written and never sent. To Daniel, dated 2019. I've been thinking about what you showed me. I think I made a mistake. I think I made a terrible mistake, and I don't know how to say that after so long. Never sent. I sat on that closet floor and I cried. Not the polite kind. The ugly, silent, heaving kind where you can't quite get enough air. The kind where you're crying. For your dad and for the friendship he lost and for the years and for the 25 years of a lie he half believed and half couldn't afford not to believe. I cried until I was empty. Then I blew my nose on a piece of paper towel I found in my pocket and said out loud to nobody, "Okay, so what do I do with this?" That's when my phone rang. The contact said, "Daniel Osei." I answered it like a person who has just been electrocuted. "I know this is strange," he said. He had a quiet voice. "Calm. I got your number from your father's lawyer. She said you'd probably found the box by now. Your father asked her to make sure you had my number if," he stopped. "I'm very sorry for your loss. Did you know him recently?" I asked. At the end. Long pause. "We reconnected," Daniel said, "about 3 years ago. We talked. A lot. Another pause. He wanted to fix things. And he was worried about what Marcus might do once he was gone. He said Marcus had been skimming from the company for years, and he'd finally been able to document it. He told his lawyer everything. And he told me. The unexpected twist, my father knew. For 3 years, my father knew. He'd been quietly, carefully building a paper trail. My dad, who fell asleep watching football and made eggs with too much butter, had been running a long game I completely missed. He was protecting you, Daniel said. He didn't tell you because he didn't want you anywhere near Marcus before everything was in order. I thought about the retirement dinner. I thought about Marcus saying loyalty isn't inherited, sweetheart. I thought about my father's face doing that complicated thing and then looking down at his plate. He was protecting me. He saw everything. He was protecting me. Daniel had copies of the financial documents. My father's lawyer had the rest. Between the two of them, and now me, we had everything. The complete picture. 28 years of Marcus bleeding a company that my father built. The total amount, when Daniel walked me through it on a call 2 days later, was $1.2 million. Not a typo. $1.2 million. I looked at the photograph of 6-year-old me and Daniel Osei laughing at something off camera. "Okay," I said. "What do we do next?" Here's what nobody tells you about planning something like this. It is deeply, profoundly boring in the best way. There are a lot of calls with lawyers. A lot of paperwork. A lot of, "And can you send that document again in PDF format?" There is nothing cinematic about it. I spent one very important Tuesday afternoon on hold with an accounting firm while eating leftover pad thai. And I thought, this is justice. This is what it looks like. Hold music and lukewarm noodles. Daniel connected me with his lawyer, Clara Mensah, who was approximately 5 feet tall and had the energy of someone who has been waiting her entire career for exactly this kind of case. I liked her immediately. We had everything documented by the time Marcus called me to schedule a meeting about the estate. "Of course," I said. "I'd love to get everything sorted." I wore the navy blue dress. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. The meeting was at the Callaway and Reed offices, my father's offices, on a Thursday morning. Marcus was already there when I arrived, sitting behind the big desk like he'd been sitting there for decades. Which, I realized, he had. He looked comfortable. That was the thing. Genuinely comfortable. He had no idea. I had Clara. I had Daniel's documentation. I had 3 years of my father's meticulous, quiet, devastating paper trail. I had a folder I placed on the desk with the care of someone setting down something very heavy. Marcus smiled. "I'm glad you came. I wanted to talk about the transition of your father's shares." "I have some questions first," I said. The tension started there. Small. A slight shift in Marcus's posture. Something recalibrated behind his eyes. But he was smooth. He had 28 years of practice being smooth. "Of course," he said. I asked him about the 1997 discrepancy. Calmly. Specifically, I used the exact number, $340,000, and watched his face do math. Your father and Daniel had a falling out, he said. Still smooth. Daniel was trying to undermine. And the 2003 transfer to the Westfield Holdings account. Clara said, not looking up from her notes. And the 2008 payments to a subcontractor that we can't find any record of existing? Marcus laughed. The laugh was supposed to sound relaxed. It didn't. I don't know where you got these numbers, but I got them from my father, I said. Silence. Not dramatic silence. Just silence. The specific kind where a person is doing a very fast and very panicked calculation. And then Marcus did what I knew he was going to do, because people like Marcus always do it. They go for the emotional jugular. They pivot to relationship. They remind you of the power dynamic and hope you flinch. He looked at me and said, with all the old authority, loyalty isn't inherited, sweetheart. It's earned. I let it sit there for a second. You're right, I said. It is earned. I opened the folder and slid it across the desk. I want to tell you that Marcus crumbled elegantly. He didn't. There was nothing elegant about it. He denied everything, and then when presented with the documentation, denied having seen the documentation, and then accused Daniel, and then accused the lawyer, and then, in the third worst moment of the meeting, tried to tell me that my father would have wanted this handled quietly, in the family. I am the family, I said, and this is how I'm handling it. He stood up. He was shaking, not with anger, with fear. And fear on a person who has been performing confidence for 3 decades looks bad. It's like watching a very elaborate sand castle collapse. You almost feel sorry for how much work went into it. Almost. You don't understand what your father and I built, Marcus said, voice cracking. You have no idea what I gave up for this company, for him. I know exactly what you gave, I said. And I know exactly what you took. He left, slammed the door. We heard him in the hallway. Clara looked up from her notes for the first time in 20 minutes. That, she said, went well. I laughed. I'm not entirely sure it was a sane laugh, but it was real. I walked out of my father's office into April sunshine and stood on the sidewalk and breathed the kind of breath that feels like the first one in a long time. Loyalty isn't inherited. No, but neither is debt. And neither is silence. And neither is the choice to protect the people you love from a quiet, well-dressed 28-year theft. Some things you earn yourself. Marcus did not take the next few weeks gracefully. 18 missed calls between Thursday and Friday. I counted. I didn't answer any of them. He left 3 voicemails that escalated from, "We need to talk," to "This is a misunderstanding," to a third one I won't quote in full, but which included the phrase, "I made that company what it is," said at a volume that suggested he was outside and possibly near traffic. Then came the LinkedIn post. You guys, the LinkedIn post. It was long. It was about integrity in business partnerships and the tragedy of family members who don't understand corporate history. It did not name anyone. It named everything. For people sent me screenshots within 2 hours, including one person I haven't spoken to since college who apparently still follows Marcus on LinkedIn for reasons I cannot explain. Clara told me not to respond. I didn't respond. I did screenshot it and text it to Daniel with 0 words, and he sent back a single period, and I feel like that was the correct response. Here's the unexpected part, the part one genuinely didn't see coming. The call started coming from Marcus's people. His secretary of 11 years, a woman named Portia who I'd met maybe 4 times at company events, left me a voicemail. I have some records, she said carefully, that I've been keeping. I didn't know what to do with them, but I think you should have them. She had copies of emails. Years of them. She'd been saving them quietly the way you save things when you work for someone you don't trust but can't afford to leave. She came and had coffee with me and slid a thumb drive across the table with the practiced calm of someone who has been waiting a long time to do exactly this. 2 of the original subcontractors, guys who'd worked with my dad in the early 2000s, reached out separately. They had stories. Small pieces they'd never quite understood that suddenly, with our documentation, made sense. It turns out the people closest to a lie often know it best. They just need someone to take it seriously first. The legal process is ongoing. I'm not going to pretend it's fun. It isn't. It's paperwork and waiting and more paperwork and the occasional call where Clara says something like, "So the other side is trying to argue." And I have to put my phone face down on the counter and breathe for a minute before I can keep listening. My life is not a movie with a clean ending. I want to be honest about that. I still have Sundays where I drive to my dad's house. which is my house now, technically, being sorted out, and I sit in the driveway and can't quite make myself go in. I still sometimes start to call him and remember halfway through finding my phone that I can't. I still have the green blanket with the burn hole from 2009, and I can't throw it away and I can't use it. So it's just sitting on my couch looking at me. But here's what's different. I have the photograph, the real one. Me, 6 years old, and Daniel Osei laughing at something off camera. I had it framed. It's on my bookshelf next to the only other picture I have of my dad smiling that wide. His face at a barbecue, 1994, holding a spatula like he's won something. Daniel and I have lunch sometimes. Thursdays, usually. He knew my father in ways I didn't. In the ways that decades of friendship produce. The frustrating ways, the funny ways, the specific ways that a person occupies someone else's life when they matter. He tells me stories I never heard. I listen. Sometimes I cry. Once he cried. We've gotten to a place where that's okay. I think about the version of my father who couldn't send that letter, who'd spent 25 years carrying a mistake he didn't know how to name, who watched Marcus say loyalty isn't inherited, sweetheart at his retirement dinner, and looked down at his plate, because what could he say, right then, without blowing everything open before it was ready? He was protecting me. He didn't get to finish it himself, so he left me the box and the key, and a lawyer who knew which calls to make, and a friendship I didn't know I'd lost, but apparently never completely did. I'm not healed. I want to be clear about that. I'm not standing here on the other side of grief and betrayal with a tidy lesson and a gratitude journal and a glow-up montage. I'm a person who cried in a car in her own driveway and ate pad thai on hold with an accounting firm and wore the navy blue dress to a meeting because her dead father's business partner told her it made her look corporate. For what it's worth, Portia, at that coffee meeting, told me unprompted that she'd always loved that dress. Very put together, she said. I told her the story. She laughed so hard she spilled her oat milk latte. Some things don't resolve. Some debts take years to collect. Some boxes stay locked in the back of closets for reasons we don't understand until later, or maybe ever. But some do open. And inside, sometimes, is a photograph of a 6-year-old laughing with a stranger who wasn't a stranger at all. Just someone her father loved and lost, and quietly, stubbornly, across 20 years in one box and one little lock, tried to give back to her. That's what was in there. That's what he left me. I think that's enough.